Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to hear from another witness, but from a different company. Is that right, Mr. Millett?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. We're going to hear from Mr. Geof Blades of CEP. May I please call Mr. Blades?
Thank you.
I do solemnly and sincerely and truly declare that I affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blades. Going to sit down and make yourself comfortable. Yes, Mr. Blades.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Blades, good morning.
Morning.
Can I start by saying thank you to you for coming to the inquiry and giving us evidence today to assist us with our investigations. We're extremely grateful to you. My questions are intended to be short and, I hope, simple, but if at any point you have difficulty understanding the question, I can repeat it or I can put it in a different way. If you feel you need a break at any time, just let us know and we can take a break, but we will take scheduled breaks halfway through the morning and then again halfway through the afternoon at an appropriate point. And can I also ask you please to keep your voice up so that the transcriber who sits to your right can get down everything you say. Also, I should just add that a nod and a shake of the head doesn't go down on the transcript.
Right.
You can say yes or no as appropriate. That would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Now, you've made two statements to the inquiry. I think the first is dated the 12th of November 2018, and that's CEP 3064244, please. Can we please have that up?
Yeah.
And that is the one dated the 12th of November. There's a signature at page 10, please, if we can go there. Is that your signature?
Yes.
And I'm going to call that your first statement, the one of November 2018. Could we please also have up CEP 3064247? Now, this is another statement from you which responded to the inquiry's request for further evidence from you, and that's dated the 16th of August 2019. Can we please go to page 15? You'll find a signature there.
Yes.
Is that your signature?
Yes.
And you also, I think, made a statement to the Metropolitan Police, and that is at MET 3040323, and that's dated the 18th of February 2019. Is that it? Is that statement?
Yes.
Thank you. It's not signed, but it has your signature, your name at the top
That's
of it.
right,
That's your statement. You also made, I think, a statement to the Metropolitan Police concerning the transfer of exhibits, and that's at MET 3040322. Can we please have that up? MET 3040322. Is that the statement transferring the exhibits?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now, have you read all of these statements recently?
I haven't read the police ones, the
Right.
Metropolitan Police ones.
But you've read the two statements you've given to the
Yes.
inquiry? Very good. So that's your first statement and your second
Yes.
statement. I'm going to call the second one the second statement. And can you confirm that their contents are true?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, the inquiry also received from you an unsolicited witness statement in October 2017.
Yep.
Can I show you that? That's CEP 508838. And that is dated, as you can see at the bottom, under a signature, the 24th of October 2017.
Yeah.
And is that your statement?
Yes.
I'm going to call that your 2017 statement, just so we're clear about
thank
it.
you.
And under the contents of that statement true?
Yes.
Have you discussed with anybody the evidence that you're going to give today?
No.
Now, I'm going to start with the first topic, which is the history and role at CEP that you had. It's right, I think, that you joined CEP in 2000, isn't it?
Correct.
And prior to joining CEP, you worked for about 15 years in a window manufacturing business.
Yes.
And initially at CEP, just to be clear, your role was business development manager and sales representative.
Correct.
And is it right that between 2004 and 2017 you were a director of CEP?
2013, up till 2013, when the business was sold.
13. Yeah, and in 2013 CEP was sold to, is it Xerxes Equity?
Yeah, that's correct.
And that meant that CEP joined what was called or is called the Omnis group of companies.
Correct.
Right. And Omnis, I think, is made up of a number of companies serving the construction industry. Is that right?
Yes.
And is it right that each one is a distinct company?
It was.
But they all share facilities such as human resources and accounting?
That's correct.
And from 2013, your job title, is this right, was Commercial Projects Manager?
The commercial projects manager was probably 2016.
Right. What was your job title from 2013?
I think it was National Glazing Manager.
National Glazing Manager. And what was it in 2012, before the sale?
I would have been a sales director of CEP, Architectural Facades.
Thank you. Now, your line manager, at least in 2000 and from 2012, is this right, was Neil Wilson?
Yes. When the business was sold in end of 2013, Roy Fuster, who was the managing director, became the managing director for about 12 months of the new business.
Right.
And then when he relinquished that, he wasn't a shareholder or anything. Neil Wilson then became the line manager.
I see. So Roy Fuster was your line manager in 2012, and then
Yes.
and after that it was in 2013.
It would have been.
It was Neil Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
2014, because the business was sold in 2013.
When in 2013?
December.
Oh, I see. At the end of the year.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you retired in 2019. Is that right?
2018.
18.
November 2018.
I see. I want to examine with you CEP's position in the supply chain, in general terms, to start with. And first of those subtopics, which I'm going to look at, would be CEP's services. Now, CEP is or was in the period 2013 to 16, I think, a fabricator of panels for use as rain screen on exterior cladding systems on buildings.
Yes, correct.
Is it right, or do I have this right, that to fabricate cladding, CEP take flat panels of products delivered to it from the manufacturer and then cut and fashion them to a particular size, shape and design for fitting onto a particular building?
That's correct.
And where CEP is not contracted to provide the design of the facade, is it right that the customer would have to supply the design to CEP?
That's correct.
Is it right also that every facade or element of a facade that CEP supplied was effectively bespoke for an end buyer or client?
Yes.
Now, we understand, and we'll come to this in detail later, but CEP works with aluminium composite panels, or ACM. Does CEP work with composite panels skinned with other metals, or did it during the period 2012 to 16?
No, it never successfully got a contract for anything other than the aluminium skins.
I see. So no zinc.
No zinc, no.
Did it ever work with non-metal skinned rain screen panels, such as, for example, Marley Natura?
No.
Have you ever heard of Marley Natura?
I have, yes.
Yes. And what is Marley Natura?
I think it's cement fibreboard.
Yes. And is it right that CEP also works with a variety of manufacturers of original products, such as 3A, who make a Lucobond?
Yes, we do.
And in general terms, is it fair to say that CEP makes its money by providing a service within a supply chain of for specific projects between the manufacturer and the end client?
Yes.
Could you just tell us in brief terms how CEP makes its profit from the fabrication of cladding panels?
They purchase the panels from the supplier, the manufacturer, the raw panel. Then we fabricate it and then put a profit margin to that, and transport costs, etc.
I see. And you say, I think you get profit, transport cost, etc. That would include the fabrication cost.
The fabrication, yes, the fabrication of the panel,
yes.
The labour too.
Yes. And would it follow from that answer that in order to maximise the profit, CEP would aim to buy the products from the manufacturer at a low price and then sell them at a higher price, building in the fabrication costs, transport costs and the margin.
Yes.
Yes. And presumably you would have a commercial interest in trying to negotiate the lowest price with the panel manufacturer.
Yes.
Yes. Is it right, tell me, that in 2012, 13, 14, those years, you would enjoy preferential rates in general, or would you negotiate individual prices on each order for each project?
We'd negotiate individual prices for each order.
Right, I see. So you weren't, as it were, a favoured buyer?
No.
I see. Can I then turn to the question of design services? In your witness statements, you mentioned Mr. Mark Hayward, who has a company or firm, I think, called Mark Hayward Associates, MHA.
That's correct.
That's right. And is it right that he's a facade, or was a facade designer?
Yes, correct.
And I think this is in your statements, but correct me, CEP would subcontract him in to design cladding from time to time where the client wanted a design service?
If CEP was providing that service, yes.
I see. And in what circumstances would Mark Hayward be contracted in to perform design services?
If CEP were selling the complete system to a contractor, then and design was required by us or by CEP, then Mark would be employed to do the design.
Right. And why would a subcontractor prefer to design themselves as opposed to leaving it to you to supply the full package?
Or CEP would contract with a principal contractor, a main contractor, and there wouldn't be a subcontractor involved. That would be material only supply. So we would supply and design the rain screen system to a main contractor, who would in turn employ an installation team to fit it to the wall. So there was no direct subcontractor.
Right. And where that happened, would there be direct contact between CEP and the installation team? So that
Through that would be directly, but through the main contractor.
I see. Right. And what would be the reason why a main contractor wouldn't come to you for the full package, but would prefer to just leave it all to the subcontractor and have the subcontractor buy in materials and do the design themselves?
Sorry, could you just run that one again?
Yes, why would a main contractor prefer to go through a subcontractor for design rather than coming to CEP for the full design and supply package?
It would be more cost effective for them to do that because they wouldn't incur the subcontractor's profit margin.
It would be more cost effective for a main contractor to come to you?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I thought.
And CEP themselves wasn't an installing contractor. We didn't do any installation. We didn't have that facility.
Right. So, just cutting to the point, on a job like Grenfell, would it have been more cost effective for Ryden to have come to CEP direct for the design as well as the supply, as opposed to using Harley?
Possibly, yes.
Yes. In your 2017 statement, the unsolicited one, can we go to that? It's CEP 508838. Can I ask you to go to page 7, please, and look at paragraph 7.10? And you describe, quoting there, for a full cladding system. And you say, halfway down, this is my standard offer on cladding systems. I would not have to liaise with Mark Hayward or any other designer at this point, as this is the standard system the company will always propose at this stage of discussions. And the context of this is that you were intending to quote at the very start of your discussions about Grenfell in April 2012. Mm-hmm. And you say, at the beginning of that paragraph, that he was intending to quote for the full cladding system. I just want to ask you what you mean by my standard offer. Do you mean there that at an early stage in design, CEP would generally, as a matter of course, offer a complete package system with insulation, cavity barriers, claddings, fixings, and design? Yes,
if that's largely what the project was going to be required. So that would be a budget figure that we would take from historic works, just to give the client or the architect, in this case, a feel for where CEP would be with sort of prices, really.
Right. Would there be a design cost built into the price that you would
Yes.
charge the client? And that would be the cost of the design, which would be outsourced to
Yes,
MHA?
we had an agreement with Mark Hayward's Associates. It was a sort of sliding scale.
Yes. Just tell me a little bit about that standard package. Was that originally designed by Mark Hayward Associates, or?
Yes, it would have been, yes.
I see. Do you know when it was originally designed?
I believe it was possibly the late 80s, early 90s.
Right. And was it kept up to date with current standards?
As far as I'm aware, it was. Well, I think we always relied on Mark Hayward to keep us up to date with stuff.
Right. And would Mark Hayward develop the specification and substitute products where necessary?
Not necessarily, no. That would be down to the client, the architect, or whoever's specifying the materials.
I see. I see. And so if design changes, like product substitutions, were made, would you expect that a designer like Mark Hayward Associates, well, it would be Mark Hayward Associates, to have considered those substitutions?
Not necessarily, no. That they would come from the client.
I see.
Mark would only work with what we were, if we were the supplier of material, what the client had changed the material to.
Yes. There was, I think, a time when CEP produced its own facade build-up in about 2016. Is that right?
How do you mean our own design build-up?
Was there a new system available in 2016?
Not that I can recall.
Right. Does the name Petrarch or Petrac panel mean anything to you?
Yes.
Is it right that in 2016 the Petrac panel became the new CEP off-the-shelf product within the?
Petrarch was another division of the old CEP company. It was nothing to do with the St Helens operation. It was manufactured down in Hastings.
Right.
And that would have got under the heading originally of CEP claddings.
Okay. Well, we may come back to that. In general terms, did CEP perform a design service itself at any stage, or simply fabrication?
Just purely fabrication.
Purely fabrication. Now, am I right that when you supplied an off-the-shelf design, for example, the Mark Hayward design, or the Petrarch design, perhaps, am I right that CEP sells all of the component parts itself? So cladding, insulation, cavity barriers, fixing elements?
Yes, we did originally. That did change.
Right.
Latterly.
Now, for the Grenfell project, we understand that the component parts of the facade were sourced separately. Insulation was sourced separately from cavity barriers, from rain screen panels. At the time of the supply to Grenfell Tower, was it common for CEP to supply only some component parts to the project rather than to supply the fully designed package?
It had become that way later on CEP's history, just the way the market had changed.
Right. When did that market start to change? Can you tell us?
I would guess sort of the mid-2000s.
Right. So is this right that CEP gradually, during the mid-2000s, began to be called on to supply only component parts?
Correct,
Well,
yeah.
that would be to subcontractors of main contractors, would it?
Yes.
I see. And were the majority of those parts rain screen and windows?
Yes.
Or what about insulation?
They could buy their own insulation. Yes, they would buy their own insulation.
They could buy their own insulation.
Yeah.
Would you ever be asked to supply insulation?
Possibly, yes.
I see. But what was the most common element of a rain screen cladding system that you would be asked to supply as a single component after the mid-2000s, do you think?
The panel.
The panel.
Possibly the rails.
Right.
The rails or the panel.
And where you were asked to supply the panel, possibly the rails, would CEP simply have sourced and fabricated them in accordance with the design supplied by the client, or would you investigate how the panel or rails would fit into the overall cladding system?
Sorry, can you just
Well, let me ask it a different way. Where you were asked to supply component parts, would CEP simply source them, fabricate them, and deliver them without asking any questions about how they were to fit into the overall rain screen system? Or did you investigate how they would fit in to the overall rain screen system?
No, we would leave that the final decision to the subcontractor. We would just fabricate them or supply them to their design requirements.
I see. And at the time of the supply to Grenfell Tower, and we're looking at 2015 now, effectively, can you tell us, even if in broad terms, what proportion of CEP's business was providing component parts to order, as we've discussed, as opposed to providing a fully designed, off-the-shelf package?
2015. Probably 16, 50-50. 50% the full system and 50% components.
Right. I'm now going to turn to the string of contracts, by way of an overview on the Grenfell Tower project. It's right, I think, that CEP contracted with Harley in around September 2014 to supply fabricated window frames and glazing.
That's correct.
Yeah. And then in February 2015 to supply fabricated cladding panels and fixings.
I think it was just the panels only.
In the end?
I'm not sure about the fixing.
All
I
right.
think it was just the panels only.
But let's ignore the fixing, but certainly the fabricated cladding panels.
Yes.
And we know, I think, that CEP was not ultimately contracted to supply the complete facade, just those component parts.
Correct.
Now, I want to look at the role that CEP played in the supply chain. First of all, Arconic, who I think were called Alcoa at that stage. Is it right that CEP had worked with Alcoa, later Arconic, for a number of years prior to the Grenfell Tower refurbishment?
Yes.
And we'll come to look at that in due course in some more detail. But we understand that CEP entered into a contract with Arconic for the supply of the Rainabond PE55 rain screen panels, the ACM panels, in March 2015 for the Grenfell Tower project.
Correct.
Yes. Now, looking at the history of the relationships with the parties in the supply chain, can we go to your first statement, please? And I want to look at Studio E to begin with. First statement, CEP 3064244, and I'd like to go to page 4 and look at the bottom of the page, paragraph 16, and the bit I want to look at goes over the page. You say there, I first became aware of the refurbishment in or around March 2012, when discussions with Studio E began. You say, I do not recall how the initial contact arose, but I assume that Studio E approached CEP, given that I had no knowledge of the planned refurbishment at this time. Just pausing there.
Yeah.
Had you ever come across Studio E before the Grenfell Tower refurbishment?
No.
Do you know how Studio E came to learn of you?
No. No.
Ryden, is it right that you'd worked with Ryden before on, I think, the Chalcots Estate project?
Yes.
That was 2006, wasn't it?
Yes.
Were there any other projects on which you had worked previously with Ryden before the Grenfell Tower project?
We worked with them on the Chalcot Estate through Harley as a subcontractor.
Yes. Any other projects?
No.
No. And Harley, let me just ask you about Harley. You say in your police statement that you worked with Harley, I think, on 10 projects before the Grenfell Tower project. Is that right?
I would believe so, yes.
Yes. Just for the reference, it's your police statement at page 4, the main one. Now, I'll give you some names and just check them off. Would that include Wayland's House?
Yes.
Olympic Way, Wembley?
I believe so, yes.
Yes. You've mentioned Chalcots.
Chalcots.
Clement's Court?
Again, I believe so. I wasn't involved in that personally.
Okay. Can we go then to the offline of this document, CEP 503010. Now, this is a list of projects done by CEP, prepared by CEP after the fire, with input from Deborah French of Arconic. And what you'll see there is an Excel spreadsheet. Do you remember this document? Have you seen this document before?
Yes, I believe I have.
And if we go down to row 38,
Thank you.
yes, it's divided up into parts. And
Yep.
this part is under projects December 13 to June 17. And cell 38, or row 38, is Wayland's house.
Yeah.
And you can see that looking across the page, you go to columns H and I. You can see Harley curtain wall in column D, and you can see in H, Rainer Bond PE, and I, face rivets. Now, face rivets is riveted or face fixed, I think, isn't it?
Correct. Yes.
As opposed to cassettes.
Correct.
Yes. And we can see the cladding panel, as I say, was Rainer Bond PE face fixed. So the supply to Wayland's house was it PE cord?
I believe so. If it's here, yes.
And we can see others up in the list saying FR, but
Yeah.
and that stands for, is that fire retardant? If you look higher up
Yes,
column H,
yeah.
see, for example, that Falkirk was Fundamax FR, fire retardant. And looking at some other projects, if you go to row 71, well, yes, row 71, you've got Olympic Way, Wembley, again, Harley curtain wall, panels only, a Luco bond under column H, PE, face rivets, you see that?
Yes.
And Chalcott's going up to row 57 is Rainer Bond PE face rivets. And again, Clements Court at 58, just below that, Hounslow, Clements Court, panels, Rainer Bond PE face rivets. Mm-hmm. Do you know whether CEP ever supplied cladding to Harley with any core other than PE?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right. Is it your recollection that most of the time when you supplied cladding panels to Harley, you were supplying face-fixed panels?
Yes. Yes.
And in fact, looking at this spreadsheet, am I right that Grenfell Tower was the only project with Harley where CEP supplied cassette panels?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, it looks at this, looking at this list of projects, and one can go up a little bit, scroll up a little bit towards the 2013 to 17 section of it, that you regularly supplied, and is this right, both PE and FR panels for high-rise buildings?
The Fundamax product isn't an ACM.
Right.
Falkirk projects.
Well, let's look at row 8. Let's just try one on you, and then we can move forward. Row 8 is Badgett Street, Birmingham, building height 30 metres, so it's above 18 metres. It's a residential, and Rainer Bond FR went onto there. You see that?
Yes.
So that's an example of where you did supply FR to a high-rise. And there's another one at row 34, I think. No, that's PE, but that's a PE cassette, also at high-rise.
Mm-hmm.
You see that? Which is a commercial.
Yes.
Would I be right, though, in saying, just in general terms, that you would supply FR and PE?
It would appear from that those two projects I wasn't involved in.
Right. Just in general terms, what would prompt a contractor to choose PE as opposed to FR core ACM panels, where they were both available?
The I would say that the FR became more prominent after the Grenfell Tower.
Right, more prominent.
Or prominent.
Yes, I can understand that. But before the Grenfell, when you say after the Grenfell Tower, do you mean the fire or the project?
Sorry, the fire.
Right. Yes, that I understand. Before the fire, and particularly I'm interested in the period 2012 to 2016, certainly 15, I'm interested in what would prompt a contractor to choose PE as a core for an ACM panel as opposed to an FR core.
I'm not sure why the contractor would have a reason for it. He probably does have a reason, but I wouldn't be aware of what his reason was.
Right. But you deal with end suppliers or end buyers. Do you know from your experience of your buyer's market why it would be that a buyer would choose PE if FR was available?
Not really, no.
What would Mark Hayward Associates put into the full-blown cladding system design where that was ordered by an end buyer? Would it be PE or would it be FR?
I'd have to ask him what he would do in that situation. I can't answer for him.
Right. Well, we'll come back to that issue later on. Is it right that zinc panels, for example, made by KME, and I'm thinking specifically of the Proteus HR zinc panel, would be supplied ready fabricated by KME and wouldn't need to come to CEP?
I guess I've never dealt with them. We never dealt with them at all. And I personally wasn't.
Right.
I was aware of the company, but I wasn't aware of the products at all.
Yes. Does it follow that anybody coming to CEP would necessarily be looking for a supply of ACM panels?
Can you repeat that one again, please?
Yes. If anyone was coming to CEP and asking for rain screen panels, they would necessarily be asking for ACM.
Not necessarily, no.
What else would they be asking?
We had the Fundamax product that's there, and we had one called Steny, which was a reconstituted stone.
Right. Stenit, reconstituted stone. Is that the Steny? Looking at this.
It is, yes.
Steny nature and colour. Reconstituted stone. Is that a particulate?
Yes.
Like cementitious particulate.
No, it's more of a stone with a fiberglass resin backing.
Right. And Fundamax. What is Fundamax?
Fundamax is a high pressure laminate.
Oh, I see. HPL.
HPL, yes.
Right. And what core did the Steny nature and Stenit product have?
It didn't have a core in the same sense as an ACM. It was a fiberglass and resin matting, and then stone was mixed on the surface or the external surface of it.
Right. And why would buyers, customers, clients select Stenit, a reconstituted stone, as opposed to, for example, ACM?
The Steny was sold primarily into Scotland, into the Scottish market, and it suited the Scottish building landscape.
Building landscape or building
the exterior of the building, it just suited what they used in
Scotland.
Scotland.
Oh, I see. So aesthetically, rather than
yeah.
from a regulatory point of view.
Yeah, we did, I think, 4 blocks in Brighton long before I joined CEP, and everything else, for instance, it went to Scotland.
And what about Fundamax? What is the skin or the external surface of Fundamax?
The high pressure laminate, that's layers of paper or thin card and resin,
right,
that's compressed together to make a high pressure laminate.
Okay. And is there a core of that?
There isn't a core in the same way, no.
And why would buyers prefer Fundamax as opposed, for example, to Renault Bond ACM, whether PE or FR?
Fundamax, the high pressure laminates were around largely before the ACMs came to be. They were a flat surface, very resilient board, very good weather board, etc., that was used on the external of buildings.
Right. I think you said before that when it came to metal-skinned panels, you would only work with aluminium. Is that right?
With ACMs, not with true monolithic aluminium. We didn't have the plant to fabricate true, 3 mil aluminium.
I see. Okay. And what about zinc?
Never worked with zinc.
Right. So I was going to ask you some questions about zinc composite materials, ZCM. Have you heard of ZCM?
I haven't.
But CEP, I think you're telling us CEP would not work or did not work with ZCM.
We hadn't worked with it.
Right. Can I then turn to your relationship with Arconic? Now, you say in your first witness statement, at paragraph 12, that CEP had a long-standing commercial relationship with Arconic, Alcoa, then Arconic, among other panel manufacturers. Is that right?
Yes.
And I think CEP had been working with Arconic as a supplier to CEP since about 2006. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
And am I right in thinking, and I get this from your statement, but the first time you worked with Arconic, and specifically Reynobond ACM, was the Chalcots Estate project in London in 2006?
Correct.
Did you ever visit the Arconic factory in Merxheim
No.
in France? We are told by Mr. Verla in his witness statement at paragraph 105, and I'll just put the reference into the transcript, it's MET 3053190, page 30, that CEP visited for a technical presentation there in the February of 2006. Do you know anything about that?
No,
So can we take it that it wasn't you who...
I didn't go, no.
You didn't go. Do you know whether it took place at all?
I don't know.
You don't know. Did CEP have an account with Arconic?
Yes.
Did CEP have an account with 3A?
Eventually, yes.
Eventually, when?
I'm not sure. I would maybe 2014, 15, I'm not sure.
And did having an account with Arconic make it much easier to place orders?
It wasn't any easier to place orders.
Right. What caused CEP to open an account with 3A in 2014 or 2015, do you think?
Prior to that, our 3As sold through distributors. And then I would guess that they decided to sell direct
I
to
follow.
fabricators like ourselves.
Yes, I see. Would you describe CEP's commercial relationship with Arconic, which you had, I think, from 2006, as a strong one, a good one?
Yeah, well, a good one, yes.
Is it fair to say that you would prefer to work with Arconic, if possible, over other manufacturers?
No.
No. Now, Deborah French says in her statement, and for the reference, this is MET 3053162 at page 2. There's no need to turn it up. Paragraph 5. She says in her second statement that she joined Arconic in 2007. That's her recollection of her joining Arconic. Have you, or had you been dealing with Deborah French from that time, 2007? Do you remember?
I don't recall, no.
How would you describe your relationship with Deborah French?
A professional business working relationship.
A good one? Good commercial relationship?
How would you describe like the other relationships we have with others, yeah?
Yes. Now, before 2012, is it right that you worked with Deborah French quite often on projects? I know quite often is a bit of a vague question, but reasonably frequently.
Yes.
And did she visit CEP's workshop from time to time?
Yes.
Did she give CEP information and brochures about Reynobond products?
Probably yes.
Did you ever meet her away from your workshop from time to time?
Only in meetings such as, if we had to go to a meeting together.
Right. A meeting with whom?
Architects. Or
Right. Okay. Architects on projects.
On projects, yes.
So you would you habitually go with Deborah French to meet architects on projects?
No, not habitually, no.
No.
Only when needed be.
Who would decide whether she should come? would the architect say, bring Deborah French? Or did you
Yes,
decide?
they could do, yes. If they wanted product knowledge of Arconic, then I would take Renabond or Deborah French in with me.
Right. Can we go to, excuse me, can we go to CEP 3051312, please? This is an email chain in April 2014. And I want to look at the email from you to her at the top of that page. This is in response to hers to you of the 25th of April 2014. Now, there's quite a long history
Yes.
to your involvement in the project, which we're going to come to later, but I just want to look at this email run. Your response to her is, Debs, you say, I will always believe you, capitalised, but not all sales reps, as I'm from that background, exclamation marks, whereas Alcoa employ honest, highly trained professionals. Enjoy your holiday. I'll just show you that as an example, but is it right that that exemplifies the sort of relationship you had with her, informal and one of trust?
Yes.
Did that kind of relationship enable CEP to get favourable deals on ACM panels?
I wouldn't say so, no.
No? There were other Arconic sales reps in the UK, I think, at the time. Have you ever heard of Robert Campbell?
No.
Robert Campbell worked on the Renault Lux product. He represented Arconic for the sale of Renault Lux. Did you know that?
I may have heard that, but I've never met the gentleman. I don't know of him.
Right. And Renault Lux is aluminium cladding with no core. It's not an ACM. Did CEP ever work with Renault Lux?
No.
I see. Does CEP or did CEP ever work with solid metal panels at all?
No.
I see. Only core. So you didn't work with Robert Campbell. Did you work with anybody else supplying Renabond ACM?
When Debbie French left Arconic, there was a gentleman called Vince Meekins took her place.
I see. And can you give a date to that?
No, not really.
Right. Now, you told us that if a designer, this is a slightly separate question from the relationships question, but you told us that if a designer chose, for example, solid aluminium or solid zinc, then that wouldn't be CEP's
No.
job. You wouldn't be manufacturing those. Right. Can I then turn to your own personal experience and knowledge? And I want to start with your experience of cladding and windows. I think before CEP, as you told us, you worked in window manufacturer.
Yes, correct.
And are therefore very familiar with window products, technology, suppliers, etc. Is it fair to say that before you came to CEP, you had a great deal more experience in and expertise in windows
Correct.
than cladding?
Correct, yes.
Have you ever had any training in cladding technology?
No.
And does it follow, therefore, that you've never had any training in the fire performance of cladding products?
No.
Now, we looked at the question of core before. We know that ACM comes in a variety of different cores, or at least two, PE and FR. I want to focus on PE. Can we go, please, to your 2017 statement at page 10? 2017 statement is CEP 508838. Page 10, please. And I'd like to look at paragraph 7.36 with you, 3/4 of the way down the page, under the heading Alteration from Zinc to Aluminium Cladding. And you say at 736, the available, you say there, the available option after Steny and zinc had been discounted, given price was an issue, was a standard aluminium composite material with a paint finish. Arconic, Alcoa, at the time produced a Renabond ACM panel, commonly referred to as Renabond ACM. This product would have a PE core. And you refer to it, as I say, as a standard and would have a PE core. And you say in paragraph 737, just below it, that PE stands for polyethylene and describes the material placed between two aluminium panels to make up a rain screen panel. The panel forms the exterior of the cladding system. What you've set out there, did you know what you've set out at paragraph 736 and 737 there at the time of the Grenfell Tower project?
Sorry, can you
Yes.
ask the question, please?
Well, let me try it a different way. Was the supply of a standard ACM with a PE core something that you had experience of at the time of the Grenfell Tower project, so from 2012 onwards?
Yes.
Yes. What was your understanding at that time, in other words, within that period, of what polyethylene was?
With regard to,
What sort of material was polyethylene?
Not- other than it was the core of the
Yes.
of the panel.
Well, what is polyethylene?
Well, it's a plastic.
It's a plastic. And you knew it was a plastic then, did you?
Not particularly. I didn't take that bit on board. It was just a PE core.
Right.
Never looked in great depth.
Did you know that polyethylene was combustible?
No.
I imagine, Mr. Blades, you'd seen many of these panels in the flesh, so to speak, had you?
Yes.
So you would have recognised the fact that there was something between the two
Yes, correct.
skins of aluminium, and it possibly looked a bit plastic. Is that?
Correct, yes.
Did it ever occur to you consciously, this is plastic?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Right. Can we please look at Miss French's second witness statement? And I referred to that earlier. It's MET 3053162. At page 7, please. And I'd like to look with you, Mr. Blades, at paragraph 28. She says about halfway down that block of text below, she says, "Of course, I appreciate that PE was plastic." Do you see that? Just below
Yes,
halfway
got it.
down.
Yeah, yes.
"Of course, I appreciate that PE was plastic and was and is flammable. That would have been obvious to anyone. But PE product was regulated and accredited by external accreditation bodies, for example, the BBA." And when she says that PE was plastic and was and is flammable, that would have been obvious to anyone. Was the flammability of PE obvious to you at the time you worked on the Grenfell project?
No.
So did you never discuss the flammability of PE with Miss French?
No.
What about with the designer, Mark Hayward?
Mark Hayward wasn't involved in the Grenfell Tower, so I wouldn't discuss it with him. I had no reason to.
No, but he would have been doing designs on other projects using PE core ACM or
I never
he told
discussed
us.
the core with him either.
Right. Before the Grenfell Tower fire, so June 2017, if a UK customer ordered ACM, did you understand them to be ordering a panel with a PE core?
Yes.
So you understood that that would be the default or standard order in the UK?
It would be the standard Renabon in that case, yes.
I see. Can we go to your second witness statement? And I want to look at FR core as a comparator. This is your second statement, page 5, please. And I'd like to look at paragraph 24. Now you say there, it's CEP 30644247, page 5. So this is your second statement, page 5, paragraph 24. You say there, underneath the heading Rayno bond with an FR core, you say, as far as I'm aware, this product is class 0.
Yes.
And then you go on to say, in the last sentence, it was not until after the refurbishment that CEP became aware that Arconic supplied an FR product, namely Rayno bond FR. When you say recently, when do you think you did learn about FR core ACM panels?
I don't recall. It wasn't a product that Renabon or Arconic pushed
You say pushed.
or promoted.
Right, but they did supply it.
Possibly, yes.
You say possibly. It sounds.
We
as if
never
you're not-
came, we prior to those dates, we hadn't, or I hadn't used the FR product.
No, but were you aware that that Arconic supplied Reynobond ACM with an FR core?
No. No.
Right. Well, we may come back to that shortly. But let me just go back to my question so that I have your evidence on it. Do you remember when it was after the Grenfell Tower fire that you did become aware that that Arconic supplied an FR core ACM panel?
No, I don't recall that.
Right. Can we go to CEP 3049832? Now, this is an email exchange in June 2013 between you and Richard Geeta, if that's the right way of pronouncing it,
Yeah.
at 3A, about another project. So this is not Grenfell. And you were asked by him, we can scroll down the email chain, we don't need to, well, let's look at the whole exchange. It starts at page 3, but the context here is that you're asking about the pricing of Reynobond as compared with the pricing of 3A's product, Alucobond. That was what you were interested in. And if we start at page 3, we can see that Richard Geeta comes to you and says, this is the 10th of June 2013, "Hi Geoff, when you have a moment, I wondered if I could inquire if our direct rates are a more attractive proposition and also have closed the gap with Reynobond. Many thanks, besten Dank und Gruß." And then if you go to page 2, you go back to him and you say, looking at the latest quotes, you were slightly higher, about 130 per square metre. You say you have quotes based on HPL. And then if you look a little bit above that on the page, 14th of June, he comes back to you. "Hi Geoff, thanks for the feedback. May I ask if the Reynobond offer is for PVDF, fire-rated core?" Just to start with, what did you understand by PVDF?
I think that's the finish, the paint finish.
Right. And then he says fire-rated core. And then if we go up to the first page, at the bottom of that page, you reply to him on the 17th of June, as we see. Just scroll up to the bottom of page 1. You say, "Morning, Richard. Ref Reynobond. I don't think so, but didn't request that spec." So is it right, looking at that in June 2013, you knew that Arconic did make a Reynobond product with a fire-rated core, but just hadn't asked for it on that occasion? Is that how we should read that?
Possibly, yes.
I see. Staying on that page, looking up the page to the top, you can see that 3A Composite reply on the 17th of June. Richard Geeta says, "Hi Geoff, that clarifies the price difference. Alucobond has an FR core and PVDF paint system as standard. Alcoa can offer this, but they will charge considerably more than £1.30 per square metre. Alcoa won't change their core until they are forced due to changes in the fire regulations, else Reynobond will become too expensive. 3A Composites are heavily marketing our FR core and discussing the requirement for fire retardant materials with architects, especially on residential buildings." Now, when you received that, you couldn't have been in any doubt, could you, that Arconic did make an FR product?
Correct.
Right. So you did discover before the fire that Arconic did make an FR ACM product?
Looking at that, yes.
I see. So are you prepared to correct the evidence you gave earlier on?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
I don't remember that email we've just looked at now. I
Fair
don't
enough.
recall it receiving that email.
Okay. And is it right that, at least looking at this, that in fact it was a significantly more expensive product than a PE core product?
Yes.
Yes. Were you aware from that FR would have a better fire performance than ACM with a PE core?
Looking at this, yes.
Yes. And it would follow, looking at this, that Alucobond 3A supplied its own FR product, namely Alucobond.
Correct.
Yeah. and that Alcoa, Arconic, weren't selling the FR version of an ACM panel because it would make their ACM product uncompetitive.
Looking at this, yes,
Yes.
correct.
And again, looking at this, and see if this has prompted a recollection. If FR core was available to an architect or a subcontractor, for example, looking at range screen ACM, why would they opt to buy a PE core at all, where it was to be used over 18 metres?
They probably wouldn't.
They probably wouldn't. Do you know why it was even offered over 18 metres where FR was available?
Sorry, can you?
Yes. Can you think of any reason why any architect or cladding subcontractor would buy a PE core ACM panel where FR was available, where the building project was over 18 metres?
No.
Can I ask you to look at Deborah French's second witness statement, MET 30533162, and I'd like you to go to page 8, please. Which is now there on the screen. If you look, please, at paragraph 32, 6 lines or so down from the start of the paragraph, she says, and this is the context of the different markets, and in Germany, she says it was more usual for customers to order FR. And then she says, I do not know the reason for this, but I assume that it related to the respective regulatory regimes. I would also add that fabricators in the UK did not really like working with FR because it is more difficult and costly to fabricate than PE. For example, it tends to wear down the cutting tools much more quickly than PE. This was a general comment made by fabricators I worked with, including, for example, Sotec, CGL, and if we turn the page, and Argonaut, but I cannot recall a specific instance of when a fabricator told me this. Is Deborah French right that FR core at ACM is more difficult or more costly to fabricate for the reasons she gives?
I couldn't say because I didn't get involved in the production side at CEP. So
Right. Had you ever heard it said that FR was more unattractive for fabricators in the position of CEP, where they were asked to fabricate an FR core because it was more costly to fabricate because it wore the tools down more quickly?
sorry, can you repeat the first part?
Yeah. Had you ever heard industry discussion that FR was more expensive for fabricators to fabricate because, for
No.
example, it wore down the tools?
No.
No. Can you comment on what she says there about that?
Not really, no.
No. It looks, looking at the list that was put together on the spreadsheet we looked at earlier, that CEP in general did supply more PE core than FR core, at least during the years 2013 to 17.
Correct.
That'd be right.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, we also know that Arconic developed its own A2 standard core in about 2015 to 16, which achieved a Euro Class A2 fire classification. Did you know that?
No.
Did any customers, to your knowledge, ever ask CEP specifically for A2 cored products?
No.
Can I then turn to the question of fixing methods? And I want to ask you about the fabricated product. In your experience, as at the period 2012 to 15, did customers tend to prefer cassette fixed cladding or riveted cladding?
I don't believe there was a particular choice. The architect or the client would have had a preference himself to either a face fix where you potentially could see rivets to a cassette fix where you can't see the fixings. It was purely aesthetic, in my belief.
Right. In general terms, though, did you detect a preference for one or the other?
Not really, no.
Right. In terms of output from your plant, would you deliver more cassette than rivet or more rivet than cassette? I know it's a very general question, but can you give us a feel for that?
Not really, no.
Right. Now, I want to turn to fire performance and the question of class 0. Now, if you go to your second witness statement, page 5, please. Second witness statement, I want to look at paragraph 22. And this is under the heading, understanding of 1, fire performance and classification, and 2, pricing and reasons for variations in pricing of types of Rainer Bond ACM before the fire at Grenfell Tower on the 14th of June 2017. And in that paragraph, you say, 3 lines down, this being said, perhaps I should start at the beginning. You say, as regards to the refurbishment, as outlined in my witness statement of 12th November 2018, CEP was never asked or instructed to carry out an assessment of the regulatory and legislative compliance of the exterior of the building. This being said, as outlined above at paragraph 19, CEP understood that the Rainer Bond panels were classified as class 0 as under the building regulations, and it was therefore our understanding that they could form part of a safe and compliant structure that was designed by other parties. Class 0. Is what you've written in that sentence, your CEP understood, your personal understanding at the time?
That was my personal understanding.
Right. How did you come to that understanding?
I don't recall it, just through listening and learning from the people we'd worked with.
Was there any purpose or point of CEP knowing the fire classification?
Was there any purpose? I'm not sure what you mean by the question, please.
Well, let me try it again. Was it relevant to CEP to know that the Rainer Bond panels were, as you understood it, classified as class 0?
Yes, I would believe so.
What was the point of that? What was the purpose?
That it complied with the building regulations.
Why did it matter to you, CEP, that it complied with the building regulations?
It was just a compliant, other than complying with building regulations, that was about it.
Right.
Oh.
Well, my question was really, why did it matter to you? Why was it
We
relevant?
just knew then it was a product that did comply with building regulations as opposed to a product that didn't comply with building regulations.
Right.
It met a standard of some degree.
Right. So did it matter to CEP that it supplied a product which complied with the building regulations?
I would say so, yes.
And is that because you didn't want to supply a product that didn't comply with the building regulations?
Yes, we did.
Yes. And did
Well, just help me, Mr. Blades. As I understand it, you get an order from a contractor. Please make up the following cassettes or panels, whatever,
Correct.
of the following material. Is that right?
Correct.
And why does it, as Mr. Millett was putting to you, why does it matter to you whether that material is compliant with the building regulations or not?
It would probably be more concern if it was a project that we were designing,
Ah, yes, that's...
as opposed to somebody saying, can you fabricate this panel? In some cases, we may not know what the building is, or if we get a panel schedule through, for instance, that's just a series of panels with a particular size and shape to them. So if we're providing our own work with our own design, then we would ensure that it met the building regulations.
Yeah. No, I understand that, certainly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Now, if we look at page 5 of your witness statement, I'd like to look at paragraph 23, we're still on page 5, in fact, but paragraph 23, you say, under the heading ACM, Rainer Bond ACM with a PE core, you say, I understand that this product is class 0 performance. And at paragraph 24, under the heading Rainer Bond with an FR core, you distinguish PE from FR. When you say you understand that this product, that's the PE core in paragraph 24, is class 0, where did that understanding come from?
Mr. Millett, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think is Mr. Blades not speaking in paragraph 24 of the FR core?
Yes, I've gone back to paragraph 23.
Ah, right.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure that was clear.
Well, that's my fault, I apologise. Looking at paragraph 23 then, just focusing on that, you say, I understand that this product is class 0 performance. And my question is, where did that understanding come from?
I would have heard that in conversation.
Right. Did you ever see any documents?
Or it would be referencing the BBA.
The BBA. All right. Well, we'll come to that later on in your evidence. And what about the FR product under paragraph 24? You say, as far as I'm aware, this product is class 0 FR performance. Again, where did that understanding come from?
Again, I would have heard that in conversation and possibly from some documentation.
Now, can we look at the bottom of that page? You can see that it says, under a heading, Rainer Bond with cores of different colours, for example, translucent or black. And if you turn over to page, at the bottom of the page, you say, as far as I'm aware, these are class 0 and I'm not aware of any price differences. What do you mean by that? What do you mean, I'm not aware of any price differences?
I wasn't aware that the colour of the core had a price difference.
Oh, I see. Right. Were you aware of any difference in price between PE and FR?
I am now, but at the time I wasn't aware, other than going back to, say, the Alucobond 3A, that there was no.
And if you go to page 6 of this statement, you can see a question or sub-question in italics there. Rainer Bond that is face-fixed, or heading, Rainer Bond that is face-fixed, riveted to buildings. You there say, as far as I'm aware, this is class 0 and I'm not aware of any price differences. Again, are you saying that there's no price difference between face-fixed and cassette?
No, I think what is being said there is there is no price difference between the Renabon product, whether it's face-fixed or formed into a cassette.
I see. Price difference to...
The material.
I see. To say price difference for you, buying
yes.
from Rainer Bond.
Yes.
Yes, I see. But there would be a price difference for the end buyer.
Correct.
Yeah. Can we just stick with this? You're saying here that as far as you're aware, face-fixed Rainer Bond was class 0, but you don't mention here of what you know about the classification of the Rainer Bond cassette system, the fire classification of the Rainer Bond cassette system. What did you understand the fire classification of the cassette fix Rainer Bond to be as at 2013?
I would understand it to be a class O, as it's the same material.
Were you aware of any classification differences between face-fixed and cassette-fixed Rainer Bond?
No.
You mentioned the BBA certificate a moment ago in your evidence. I want to start on that topic just generally. We'll come to it in more detail later on, but I just want to ask you about it generally. Were BBA certificates asked for by building professionals, so far as you're aware, when considering what cladding materials to use on the building?
Occasionally, yes.
Yeah. And was it your experience that the detailed information contained in a BBA certificate would routinely be considered by those building professionals, architects or cladding subcontractors?
I would believe so, yes.
Right. Did you ever get any questions yourself asked to you about the details contained in BBA certificates?
Not that I recall.
Do you know what status the BBA certificate for example, Renault Bond, PE Cord, ACM had in the industry? What status it had? How important was the BBA certificate?
I don't know. I'm not aware of that.
Right. Were you asked to provide the BBA certificates yourself, or in your experience was that something that architects or buyers would ask directly of the manufacturer?
Sometimes, if they may ask for it through ourselves,
Right.
or they may take it direct from whoever they require that information from.
Right. And would you supply the BBA certificate to your customer, your end buyer, as part of the contract package?
If we were asked to, yes.
Right. Did the fact that the panel had a BBA certificate help you market the products which were the
Not
subject
particularly, no.
Right. Can we go to your second witness statement at page 14? And I want to ask you some questions about what you knew about fire safety test results. Now, at the top of page 14, you can see that you're asked a question in the context of your first statement, where it says, you state that Deborah French provided Harley and you a copy of the BBA certificate 08/4510 for Renault Bond cladding. Prior to this is the question, were you aware of the BBA certification of Renault Bond and in particular its fire performance rating? And your answer is yes, I was aware of the certification and by default its fire rating as class 0. What did you mean there by default?
Just the fact that I was aware that the product was Class O.
Well, it doesn't quite answer the question. You use the words by default its fire rating as class 0. Can you just explain what you mean in that sentence? Looking at the question that you were asked.
Other than I would have seen the Class O rating within the BBA certificate.
I see. So do you mean there, because you knew of the certification, ergo, I'm sorry to use that word, you knew it was class 0 or thought it was class 0?
Yes.
In other words, you took the certificate at face value?
Yes.
Yes. Now, paragraph 67, you say, under the question, what did you understand class 0 to mean and what did you think its significance was, you say, I understood that class 0 meant that the product was of limited combustible nature, linked to surface spread of flame. I understood that it met the required standards of the building regulations. What did you mean there by limited combustible nature linked to the surface spread of flame?
It didn't instantly ignite. It had a limited amount of combustibility.
Right. What was the source of your understanding that class 0 meant a limited combustible nature?
Could you re-ask the question,
Yes.
please?
You say, I understood that class 0 meant that the product was of limited combustible nature. How did you come to that understanding? How did you learn that?
I don't recall. It's maybe something that was probably said within the office at the at some point, or became aware of it through general office conversations or industry conversations.
Right. And you say that you understood that it met the required standards of the building regulations. How did you come to that understanding, do you think?
Again, I don't recall particularly how I came back.
Right. Did you have a working knowledge of the building regulations?
No.
Can we go to CEP 60148? CEP 60148, please. This is CEP's quotation from February 2013 to Leadbitter for the Grenfell Tower project, and it's in fact signed by you. I don't think we need to see that, but if you go to the top of the page, you can see it's sent to Mohit Kotecha at Leadbitter, dated the 4th of February 2013, and you are quoting there in the second paragraph, for rain screen overcladding panels and column casings are to be manufactured utilising 4mm Rainobond zinc patina paint finished ACM. You see that?
Yes.
And then you say towards the bottom of the page, Rainobond ACM panels achieve the following: Class 0 BS 476 Part 6 and Class 1 BS 476 Part 7. Rainobond ACM achieves BBA accreditation. Where did you get that information from, do you think?
I don't recall.
It's not something that you would have had in your head, is it? Or maybe it was.
I was aware that Rainobond had a BBA certification, and I was aware that it met Class O.
Yes. But you go on to say Class 0 BS 476 Part 6 and Class 1 BS 476 Part 7. That's quite technical. And my question is that something you knew, as it were, off by heart, off the top of your head, or did you have to look at a document to put those technical details in there?
I would have been advised that somewhere by someone. I couldn't answer that.
Right.
It's just something that I was aware of. How I came by it, I can't recall, and we just put it in that letter.
Right. Do you think you might have? I see. Did you realise that the BBA certificate for Rainobond doesn't actually say that the PE cord ACM, the standard sample, passed those particular tests? Only the FR panel had achieved Class 0 in testing to BS 476, 6 and 7.
No, I didn't.
Right. Did you know what BS 476 Part 6 and BS 476 Part 7 results meant when you set them out in your quote here?
I had a brief understanding of what the two parts were.
Right. And what was that?
I think the Part 6 was the time it took for a panel to ignite, and Part 7 was how far it spread in a given set time.
Right. And is that something you knew from looking at documents, or something you just gathered as part of your experience?
I would have been told it or gathered it through my experience, yes.
Right. Did you ever do any training on the building regulations and fire testing and classification? No. Right. Did you know that, in fact, it's not correct that the ACM PE panels had achieved a Class 0 476 Part 6 and Part 7 test? No. Right. Did customers ever ask for details or reports of BS 476 fire performance testing, whether Part 6 or Part 7 or both?
Not that I'm aware of.
What about European classifications?
Again, not that I'm aware of.
What about certification to BR 135 criteria?
Not that I'm aware of.
So far as involved.
Not that I recall.
Right. Did you ever read BR 135, which
No.
deals with insulation? No? Right. Did you have any knowledge of BS 8414 tests?
No.
If a customer had asked you about whether a particular product, whether it was insulation or rain screen panels, had passed fire tests and classification, would you have answered yourself, or would you have referred to somebody else?
I would have referred it back to somebody else.
Who would have you referred it to, do you think?
It could be the material supplier, or maybe Mark Hayward Associates.
And would Mark Hayward Associates be, as it were, an in-house source of that kind of information that you could just tap?
He could probably answer the question. He may have documentation that would answer the question.
I see. And he was a resource for you would use regularly, or was available to you?
Yes, he was available if we needed to ask him questions. Certainly if the project was an in-house designed project.
Yes, I see. Mr. Chairman, I've got about 4 or 5 more questions on this topic before changing topics.
Well, why don't you finish?
That would be convenient, thank you. Can we go back then to our discussion about the CEP design system in light of what we've just been talking about in design terms? Can I go, please, to CEP 57377? This is an email from Roy Fuster in May 2016, subject cladding fire test reports, the attachments you can see there, and Roy Fuster says, finally, and I think this is just help me, is this an internal email? It looks as if it is.
Yes.
Yeah. Finally, exclamation marks, please find attached BR135 testing certification. And this is a test or certification which comprises a BR135 report and a BS8414 report about a CEP system with, as it turns out, a PETRAC panel. Were you aware yourself of the fire safety testing done on that system?
No.
No. Did you personally appreciate at the time of the supply of the rain screen panels on the Grenfell Tower project of how cladding systems could comply with the applicable provisions of the building regulations and approved document B?
No.
Now, looking at this email, would you accept that there were at least some people within CEP, so Neil Wilson, your line manager, and Roy Fuster, your ex-line manager, I think, that did appreciate the need for cladding systems which were sold by CEP to be fire tested?
Yes.
Yes. Was that new as at the date of this email, so 2016, or was that always the case before that?
I think this would be new.
What was the reason for that being new? Was there a new concern or a new
I'm
requirement?
not sure. I'm not aware of that, so I can't answer that.
Did CEP obtain fire test data such as this for all systems supplied to it by end users?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right. And so that wouldn't have included supply of ACM panels for the Grenfell Tower project, presumably?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Is there a reason why there is that distinction? You would provide a fire test, you'd get a fire test or certification for the system we see in 2016, but not for the supply of the ACM panels to Grenfell?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right. Do you know any reason why that is?
I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, that may be a convenient moment.
Right, thank you very much. Well, Mr. Blades, we're going to have a short break now. I'm going to ask you to go with the usher and come back in, let's say, at 20 to 12.
Okay.
Please, while you're out of the room on this and any other later occasions, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it.
Okay, thank you.
All right? Thank you. Would you like to go with the usher, please? Thank you. Twenty to 12, please. Thank you. Thank you. Would you like to ask Mr. Blades to come back in, please? All right, Mr. Blades, you ready to carry on?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Blades, I'd like to ask you some questions now about the Chalcots Estate project. That's a project, isn't it, where CEP supplied Rainobond panels in London, Camden
Correct.
Town. And first of all, the contractors on the project were Ryden, weren't they?
Correct.
And Harley was the cladding subcontractor.
Correct.
And Arconic supplied the Rainobond cladding.
Correct.
And I think you told us earlier this was the first time CEP had worked with Arconic, then Alcoa.
I believe so. Correct. Yes.
And Harley did the design for the cladding at Chalcots, didn't it?
Correct.
Were you aware that Chalcots had a 4mm ACM panel, face-fixed, and had a rock wool geoslab insulation behind it within the system?
I was. Yes.
Yeah. And the ACM that was used on that project was a Rainobond ACM with a PE core.
Correct.
Do you recall who specified the rain screen material for that project?
I don't. There was a problem with the initial ACM that was on the buildings,
Yes, et al. Bond.
at Elbond, and then I don't know who then came back and specified Rainobond.
Right. Do you remember whether it was the architect or whether it was Harley who specified Rainobond?
I don't know.
Do you remember whether it was you who recommended Rainobond?
It wasn't me.
It wasn't you. Now, do you remember that in January 2012 there was a fire in one of the Chalcots tower blocks, namely Taplow House? Does that ring a bell with you?
Yes, it does.
And there was a report done by Harley of that fire, an incident report. Do you remember that? Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, no.
You haven't. I see. Can I just show it to you? We can go to the offline reference to it, which is CEP 503222, please. This is the email chain with the abseil report attached to it. And I'll just show you the bottom of the first page.
Okay.
You can see that you were copied into an email below that, which forwarded the report. So we start with the email from Roy Fuster to you at the bottom of page 1, and the subject is FW forward Taplow House fire damage. Do you see that? We're looking at page 1, the second email on that page.
Yes.
Yes, and your that comes to that comes from Roy Fuster to Neil Wilson and Steve Roberts,
Yes.
and then immediately above that,
Yeah.
just below the line, Steve Roberts sends that to Roy Fuster and copies you.
Correct.
You see that?
Yes.
As well as Neil Wilson.
Yeah.
Right, now let's just then look below at the email on page, starts on page 2 in substance. The very start of it's at the bottom of page 1. The substance of it's on page 2. Hi Roy, please see attached a report with regard to the fire damage at Taplow House, Camden. We have now been told that they wanted to get on with the repair/replacement work. And it goes on to detail that the damage is 17 stories up in the air. We propose replacing all the damaged panels. And then in the next paragraph, we would need you to provide the Rainobond rails and windows. Now, just looking at that email chain, would you accept that historically you were copied in to an email which forwarded the report attached by Ray Bailey to Roy Fuster in June 2012?
Yes.
Thank you. Did you read that report?
I may have done at the time. I
Right.
don't recall.
Let's look at page 2. I'll give you the reference. It's CEP 503223. And let's go to page 2. And you can see, if we go to page 2, that it says that in the second paragraph, the damage was clearly evident internally with extensive damage to the fabric of the building structure, which included damage to the concrete frame, which exposed rebar to the ceiling. You see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then if you go on, it says, the very bottom of the page, however, the fire was contained from spreading to over floors by the extensive fire breaks located at, and you have to turn the page, the head and sill of each window. Smoke damage caused further damage to the external cladding and cavity. Now, do you remember reading that at the time when you got this report in June 2012?
I don't recall reading it, but
Right.
I probably will have done if it's been forwarded to me, but I don't recall it.
Yes. And after that fire, did you think about the extent to which the cladding had contributed to the damage caused by the fire?
No, I don't recall.
Did you or anybody else at CEP consider any lessons to be learned from the Taplow House fire?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did the fact that this fire had taken place and the Rayner bond had performed in the way it did not prompt you to consider its safety from a fire perspective?
It didn't me personally, no.
Did anybody else at CEP?
I can't say, I don't know.
Was there no discussion within CEP about the safety of the Rayner bond product from
Not
fire
that I
safety
recall.
perspective? Right. Can we look at the statement of Mr. Wehrle of Arconic, please? This is MET 3053190. And I'd like you to go to page 29 of that, please, and look at paragraph 103. And he says at the bottom of that page there, as far as I'm aware, my only contact with Ryden prior to the Grenfell Tower fire was in relation to a separate project where Rayner bond product had been fitted on a project at Camden in London, the Chalkett's estate. And then he says this: I was asked by Vince Meekins to attend a site visit with himself and 2 people from Ryden, Alan White and Steve Blake, on 4th of May 2017 in relation to a delamination issue allegedly affecting some panels fitted to those blocks. During that meeting, we walked around the perimeter of all the tower blocks at the Chalkett's estate, and the technical delamination matter was discussed. A sample of the material from one of the towers was taken by one of the Ryden representatives and provided to me for further review. And then he says this: during the course of that site visit, I expressed to the 2 Ryden representatives surprise to see a number of buildings of such height with ACM PE cladding material rather than an FR product. The Ryden representatives commented that the relevant UK regulations allow the use of ACM PE products in such scenarios. I did not make any further inquiries relating to UK regulations following this comment by Ryden. Now, first of all, were you aware of this visit made by Mr. Wehrle to Chalkett's in May 2017?
I don't recall being aware of it, no.
Right. Did you ever meet Mr. Wehrle at any stage?
No.
Right. Can we then turn to CEP's role in the specification of Rayner bond ACM from 2012? And I'd like to start, if I may, in March 2012 with the initial meetings in relation to Grenfell Tower. Can we go to CEP 7043? This is an email of the 29th of March. If we go to page 2, it's an email run that ends on the 4th of April in this document, but starts on the 29th of March. And at the very bottom of page 2, we can see that Bruce Soanes sends you an email on that day. Grenfell Tower upgrade, meeting 4th of April at 11 a.m., and that's the subject. and he says, "Hi, Geoff. Please see our address and details below. I appreciate you coming in. We are currently working at risk for Kensington until funding is secured." And then he asks you in the next, well, I'll share it to you. "The intention is to procure the project as an add-on to the neighbouring project, the Kensington Academy and Leisure Project. Please could you bring pictures or drawings of the Enfield Homes project? I think it will be a useful reference when discussing it with our client. I think I could see the Enfield Towers from the roof of Grenfell, see attached." Do you know whether there were any communications between you and Studio E that preceded this one?
No.
Do you know who effected the introduction?
I believe that Studio E contacted the office, CEP's office.
Do you know how CEP came by how Studio E came by CEP?
I don't know.
Now, you became aware at this point that Studio E was the architect for the Grenfell Tower project.
Correct.
Is it right that from the very outset you therefore knew that Grenfell Tower was a high-rise building?
Correct.
In other words, over 18 metres in
Correct.
height. Can I ask you to go to MAX 402709, please, page 1. This is an email from Bruce Soanes of Studio E on the 29th of March 2012, so the same day as the email I've just shown you to you. And it's to Mark Anderson at the TMO, copied to some people at Max Fordham and Curtins Consulting and others. Subject Grenfell Tower upgrade. You see that?
Yes.
And it looks from this that he had set up a meeting with you to discuss budget and options. If you look at the third paragraph down, he says in that paragraph, in the second sentence, "I have set up a meeting here with CEP," and provides a web address, "next week, Wednesday, to discuss options and budgets for the overcladding." Did you understand that the purpose of Mr. Soanes seeking a meeting with CEP was to discuss options and budget for overcladding?
Yes, it was to... Yeah, I wasn't aware he was looking for budgets, but possibly yes.
Yes. Do you remember whether a meeting did take place in that following week? In other words, the week after the week in which the 29th of March sat?
No, I couldn't make it on the 4th, if that was the week after.
Yes.
Inclement weather. And I arranged to go down the week after, I think it was the 11th.
Now, let's look at page... we can go back to CEP 7043. We can see how the email run with Studio E pans out. At the top of that page, we have Marcus Kiefer of Studio E's email to you on the 4th of April, the original date for the meeting. And you're right, because in the second email down from that, you email him that day to apologise for the English weather, and the meeting's postponed to the 11th. And then in Marcus Kiefer's email to you, he says in the second paragraph, "Since we have a further meeting with the client on the morning of 9th of April 2012, we would appreciate your initial thoughts regarding the appropriate cladding systems and the rates associated with them." What did you understand Mr. Kiefer to mean by appropriate cladding systems there?
What system we could offer and what CEP had to offer in relation to Grenfell Tower.
Right.
Or to a tower block.
Now, at that stage, was there any discussion or thinking either between you and Studio E or internally at CEP as to whether it would be a bespoke, full-blown, tailor-made system or just supply of individual components?
We would have thought it could have, hoped it would have been a full, complete system.
Right. And is that because you would make more money on it?
No, it's because what we do, we supply, or that then we supplied a complete, full system.
Right. Can we then go to your second statement at page 8, your second witness statement, CEP 3064247, please. And I'd like to go to page 8, paragraph 40, as we see there. You say you responded. You say, "I responded to Bruce Soanes at Studio E on the 5th of April. and halfway down that paragraph you say, I did not consider that this was a request for advice, but was merely providing information at this stage. But the question I have is, didn't you understand Mr. Kiefer to be asking for advice about what cladding would be appropriate for Grenfell Tower?
He asked me for my initial, or our initial thoughts, and whether that was advice or inquiring what we offered. I just took it as a general inquiry to what we could offer.
Yeah, you say I didn't consider that this was a request for advice. And my question is, why not?
Or maybe I did, or just the way I read it, as it was just a, what can we offer? Whether that was classed as advice or our thoughts, or I didn't read too much into other until I'd met the gentleman.
Right. Did you tell Mr. Kiefer that you couldn't personally or corporately advise on an appropriate cladding system?
I didn't tell him that, no.
No. Did you tell him that CEP would have to engage a designer such as Mark Hayward Associates in order to provide the advice he was
I don't
offering?
recall if I did at that stage.
Okay. Now, we can see, if we go to CEP 7043, that in his response of the 4th of April, Mr. Kiefer attached some floor plans as well as the south elevation and some photos. You see that in the first paragraph of his email.
Yes.
Now, and I'm sorry to jump around, if you go back to paragraph 41 of your statement, second statement, page 9, CEP 3064247, page 9, you say at paragraph 41, and it's the previous page, I'm afraid. We go back to page 8. You say there at the bottom of the page, I would not have given any advice because we were not aware of a specification. Now, in fact, Marcus Kiefer's email did attach, as I've shown you, floor plans, the south elevation, and photos of the tower. So you were given specifications, weren't you?
I don't think it was a specification for materials or products. I think it was an outline of what the building was, rather than requesting specification of materials.
Well, what do you mean when you say that you weren't aware of a specification?
But a specification to me would be where they specify particular materials, what cladding panels, for instance, windows, for instance, what they want to achieve. I don't recall that what Marcus sent through had a sort of specification as such.
Right, but given that you were sent indicative existing floor plans and the south elevation and some photographs, was that not enough detail for you to be able to provide at least some information or advice on an appropriate cladding system, as Mr. Kiefer had asked for?
Yes.
So why didn't you go back to him with some advice or information about an appropriate cladding system?
I believe we sent him some indicative details down, but no rates were given.
Right. Did you consider that what you had from him was not enough?
Sorry?
Did you think that what you'd had received from Mr. Kiefer was not enough for you to be able to advise him on an appropriate cladding system?
I believe that the information we sent down was so he could attend a meeting prior to me meeting them to get more information of the project.
Right.
I wonder whether we're getting a bit caught up on the word advice, which may have different connotations for different people.
Yes.
My understanding of the position is that, Mr. Blades, is that CEP was asked to give an indication or make a proposal. Is
Yes.
that what you understood?
That's why I would say it, yes, thank you, yes.
But I also understand that you would not propose something you didn't think was suitable.
Correct.
So you were providing information about what you could do on the basis that you thought it was a suitable thing to offer.
Yes, correct.
Right. Does that? Are you trying to get at more than that, Mr. Millett?
Well, I want to know whether or not what Mr. Kiefer had given you was sufficient for you to be able to do what he'd asked you.
Probably not, other than giving indicative details of what he was looking at. I
Right.
can't recall every detail that we got through. I do recall there was a picture of the elevation, but I'm not sure exactly what he sent through at this moment in
Right.
time.
We don't see that you went back to Marcus Kiefer and told him that you needed more information or a specific spec in order to provide the thoughts he'd asked you for.
Well, I believe I was going to a meeting a week later.
I see. So you do it at that stage? would you?
Yes.
I see.
Yeah.
Let's go to CEP 7054. This is an email you wrote on the 5th of April to Bruce Soanes, so the day after seeing Marcus Kiefer's email, and you sent him 15 PDFs, which are drawings showing a cladding system.
Correct.
Yes. So just pausing there, you did actually send some design information or detailed technical information on cladding to Mr. Soanes in response to the request.
Yeah, in response to Marcus
Yes.
Kiefer's request, yes.
Then let's go to one of those attached drawings. It's CEP 7059, please. And this is a drawing by MHA, Mark Howard Associates, from January 2008. You can just see that at the bottom
Yes.
right-hand corner, of a typical windowsill detail at Stretford House, which was a project where the client seems to have been, MHA's client was CEP Architectural Facades. Now, Stretford House was a 66-metre, 23-floor residential high-rise, wasn't it?
I don't know the height of it, but yeah, it was a tall building, yes.
It's a tall building, and over 18 metres at any rate.
I would think so, yes.
Right. And this is a sill detail. In the bottom corner tags, we can see the product. Can you see that? And the rain screen is 4mm thick PPC aluminium composite panel.
Correct.
And does PPC mean polyester powder coated?
It does, yes.
And ACM we know, aluminium composite we know. And it shows a rivet, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And for what it's worth, while we're on it, rock wool duo slab insulation.
Correct.
Before you sent those drawings to Mr. Soanes, did you pass the query that you'd received from Marcus Kiefer to MHA to ask him what suitable cladding systems or what drawings he should provide, or you should provide?
I don't recall whether I asked Mark for them or whether they were available within CEP to send down.
Right.
If they weren't available within the sort of CEP file documents, I would have asked Mark to forward them to me.
Right. Do you accept that by sending these drawings of past projects, such as Stretford House, to Studio E, you were giving Studio E the impression that you were willing to give advice on suitable cladding systems for Grenfell Tower?
In the future, yes, probably.
Yes. And as part of that, to be advising that ACM cladding could safely be used on Grenfell Tower.
Can you just rephrase that?
Yes,
please?
and as part of that exercise, providing them of indications of suitable, appropriate cladding systems, that ACM, as the rain screen, could be used safely on Grenfell Tower.
I believe so, yes.
Yes. Now, on the 11th of April, you referred to that date earlier, you, I think, did go for a meeting with Bruce Soanes and Marcus Kiefer of Studio E.
Correct.
Was that on site at Grenfell
was,
Tower?
correct, yes.
It was. Did you discuss rain screen cladding?
I don't recall, but we probably would do because that was the purpose of the visit. To discuss the CEP products.
I see. You say the purpose of the visit,
Was to discuss what they was looking for Grenfell Tower.
appropriate cladding systems?
Yes,
I see. Did you understand that to be an entire system or just the rain screen element?
the entire system.
Right. So can you tell us what products you discussed at that meeting?
I don't recall what products in particular.
Right. Did you discuss ACM?
I don't recall.
Right. Can we move on in time then to October 2012 and start there with your second witness statement, CEP 306447, page 6. And I want to show you paragraph 32, please. You can see that at 32, under the heading Use of Reynobond 55 on Grenfell Tower, you say in the second sentence, I introduced Deborah French of Arconic to Studio E as being the representative of Arconic who could demonstrate their products. However, I had no involvement in the discussions. So is it right that, just looking at that Arconic came to be involved in the Grenfell Tower project because CEP introduced them to it?
Correct.
Now, I think you had a meeting with Studio E on the 16th of October 2012.
Correct.
And we can see an email, CEP 503961, please. This is an email of the 9th of October 2012 from you to Bruce Soanes on that day, subject Grenfell Tower. Hi, Bruce. Just to confirm our earlier telephone conversation, ref the above, that myself and Debbie French of Reynobond will meet at your office next Tuesday, 16th October, 11:30, to discuss zinc rain screen. Now, first, was that meeting, to your knowledge, the first meeting that Deborah French had with Studio E?
To my knowledge, yes.
Yes. Did Bruce Soanes ask for that meeting, in other words, a meeting with Deborah French, or did you and Deborah French suggest it to Bruce Soanes?
I would have suggested it to Bruce Stones to introduce Reynobond or their zinc product to them, because CEP didn't have a zinc product.
CEP didn't have...
We'd never worked with the zinc.
I see. I'm going to come back to that in a second, because I'm interested in the zinc. But before I get there, can I ask you, why did you only bring Deborah French of Arconic to that meeting and not any representative of any other manufacturer of panels?
Because I was aware through either historic conversations or seeing a sample that Reynobond had a zinc appearance finish to a panel, or a zinc panel.
Yes.
Or a zinc finish to a panel.
Did no other manufacturers have a zinc finish?
I don't recall them doing, but I don't know.
What about VM zinc?
I don't know them.
Right.
I didn't know them at the time.
Did you think of looking around the manufacturer's market to see if anybody else did a zinc product?
No.
Right. So was your thought process, they want a zinc panel, I'll think of Debbie French, I'll take her to the meeting?
No, they were looking for a zinc panel, and I was aware that Reynobond had a zinc finished panel.
Right. Did you take a note of this meeting? Do you remember?
I believe I did, yes.
Do you still have those notes?
I don't think I do, no.
Have you looked for them?
I know there's one in the documents.
Right. In terms of the cladding materials under discussion at the time of this meeting, obviously we can see from this email that Studio E was considering zinc as the material for the rain screen.
Correct.
Did you discuss zinc as a cladding option? Zinc itself as opposed to a zinc finish?
I didn't personally know.
Right. Was there a discussion about any other finish other than zinc itself?
In the meeting?
Yes, in the meeting.
I believe so, yes.
What did you discuss?
I think Reynobond or Debbie French discussed options where you can offer paint finish to replicate zinc.
Right. I see. So those were different options from a zinc finish. When you say zinc finish was discussed, was that the zinc composite material?
Yes, I became aware of how they produced that panel. They had a skin of zinc, a very thin sheet of zinc that becomes bonded to a core in lieu of an aluminium-faced core.
Right. Now, I think you told us earlier this morning that CEP didn't, as it were, do zinc.
Correct.
And didn't do ZCM. Given that the purpose of the meeting, as we can see from this email, was to discuss zinc rain screen, what did you think CEP's role would be in that?
In the knowledge, I guess I would have had a conversation with Bruce to explain that there was a product that we could offer that had a zinc finish to it. I didn't know particularly till I got there how they was viewing zinc in their opinion.
Oh, I see. So do I understand it this way, that you thought you were going to the meeting to discuss a zinc finish,
Yes.
In other words, a non-zinc material got up to look like zinc.
Or the building, they're required to have an appearance to zinc to the external face.
Right. I see.
And the fact that, as I've just said, that Renabon had a product that had a zinc appearance finish, the object of the meeting was to see if that was suitable.
Did it become clear to you at that meeting that Bruce Soanes wanted actual zinc? In other words, the metal itself?
Yes.
Right. And what did you think about that?
I got the impression that he was open to options.
Could Arconic supply actual zinc?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Right. So how was given that Arconic didn't, as far as you know, didn't supply actual zinc, other than perhaps a zinc composite, which you wouldn't cut anyway, and given that Bruce Soanes was after actual zinc, the real thing, how was that meeting left?
I don't recall particularly how it was left, other than I think they may have requested some samples of the zinc.
Right.
I have a feeling that did you mention VM Zinc?
Yes.
I think Debbie French knew the people at VM Zinc, and she was contacting them.
Right.
You know, whether that was going down that particular road and we would have been out of the project, I can't recall.
Right. Why would Debbie French be promoting, perhaps that's not too strong a word, a material made by someone other than Arconic?
I believe they used VM Zinc to provide the zinc skin that went on their product.
Right. I see. So that's the sheet that goes on
the outer face.
The outer face
yes.
and the inner face of
Yes.
the ZCM product. But nonetheless, if that had been selected, you would have formed no part of the supply chain because you didn't cut zinc.
Well, we could have provided that zinc panel because we may not need to cut the zinc face.
I see.
If it was a face fixed panel, we would just drill and fix it to the rail, rivet to the rail system.
But that would have been a first for CEP, would it?
It would have been, yes.
Yes, I follow. Was it your impression at the meeting that Miss French promoted the ACM product? When I say the ACM product, I mean the ACM PE product.
Yes.
Right. Over zinc.
Over zinc.
In other words, in preference to zinc.
It was I think she was promoting both the zinc finish and a traditional ACM.
Right. And when you say the zinc finish, do you mean
the zinc skin?
Of actual zinc rather
yes.
than the finish got up to look like zinc.
And I think it was down to the client or the architect as to how far that was going to be taken.
I see. So was it your impression, just to summarise it, that Debbie French promoted the ACM and the ZCM manufactured by Arconic?
Correct.
I've got it. Right. Can we then go to CEP 3048712, please? This is an email from you to Deborah French on the 16th of November 2012. And you say to her, subject Grenfell Tower, "Hi Debs, just spoke with Adrian Jess at Studio E, who we met, and they're still going along the Rhine zinc route, but still early days and no firm costs have been provided regarding rain screen, ! Did you mean there that Studio E was opting or looking to opt for Rhine zinc at this stage? In other words, a cladding that was not manufactured by Arconic?
Yes, I think they'd spoken to a business, Rhine Zinc, who I'm not particularly aware of, but there was I believe there was another zinc panel or sample that they exhibited at the meeting on the day I was down there in October.
Yes. And when you say no firm costs have been provided regarding rain screen, did that indicate that it was still possible that Arconic's ZCM or ACM might still be specified, still in with the chance?
I would agree, yes.
Yeah. Did you suggest at any stage to Studio E, or for that matter, Ryden or Harley at a later stage, that Arconic products would be cheaper than Rhine zinc?
No.
In this email, were you trying to encourage Debbie French to continue to push for the sale of their ACM Renabon product?
I was, yes, we was probably, if Renabon got in the job, we would have an opportunity.
Yes. I mean, clearly, if Rheinzink was selected, then neither you nor she would be involved
Correct.
in the project. Yeah, and therefore it was a benefit.
Certainly yours. I can't speak for Debbie French or Arconic on that matter.
Well, Debbie French didn't supply
Correct.
Rheinzink. Yes. Just thinking briefly about the differences between ZCM as provided or made by Arconic and ACM. Is ZCM more expensive than ACM?
I don't know.
Right.
We never priced the ZCM, so I don't know what the cost it was.
No. Okay. Did you ever discuss the potential price of ZCM with Deborah French at this stage?
Not that I recall.
Right. So you never told Deborah French that ZCM would be too expensive for the Grenfell Tower project?
I didn't know.
No. Can we then move to January 2013 and the quotation that you supplied to Mohit Kotecha at Leadbitter? We looked at this earlier on. And I think you remember, at least from what I showed you earlier, that you did supply a quotation
Correct.
to them in January 2013. And then I think it was followed up on the 4th of February, as we've seen, in the formal quotation. Let's just see how that builds up. If you go first, please, to CEP 3048886. This is Mr. Kotecha's email to you of the 24th of January 2013. And if you look at the first paragraph, he says, Geoff, nice to meet you today at the baseline offices to review the Grenfell Tower project with Gareth and myself. As discussed, please find attached all necessary details for CEP Architectural to produce a design, manufacturer and supply price along with installation costs from your approved installer, High-Rise Solutions. And then in the 4th paragraph down, he says, as mentioned to ADAR report, next week, an initial budget figure would be very handy early next week with a further more detailed quote to follow. You can see there that the subject matter of his request is the design, manufacture and supply. You see that in the first
Yes.
paragraph. Was that a request for a full-blown CEP system, so supplying design services as well as all components of the facade and the windows?
I believe so, yes.
Right. Now, with that email, as we can see from the attachment, Mr. Kotecha supplied a specification. That is at CEP 3048887. If we can look at that, please. There it is. Do you remember seeing this?
Yes.
Yes. That's the first page of it. I'd like to go to page 6, please, and look with you at the middle column on page 6. If we could just blow that up a little bit, you can see there that there is a heading external envelope. Under the bigger heading, existing residential flat level 1 to 20. You see that?
Yes.
And under external envelope, we can see a variety of things, and the third entry down is H92. Rain screen cladding, existing columns, overcladding, and then a bullet point, VMZ composite zinc panels. You see that?
I do, yes.
And below that, there's another H92 entry, just two below that. H92 rain screen cladding, external wall, 12 millimeters HPL cladding, truss butt or similar, and subframe system, surface fixed cappings to match panel colour. Now, did you understand the VMZ composite zinc panels reference in the first of those H92 references to be a reference to zinc panels with a core?
I probably would have done at the time, yes.
And that would be an FR core, would it?
I don't know.
I think it would be if Deborah French is correct. That would be an FR core. Did you understand the reference to Trespa in the second H92 reference there to be to a high pressure laminate or HPL composite?
Yes.
Now, you, I think, respond to that quotation by email on the 31st of January 2013, and let's look at that. It's CEP 60138. And I'd like to look at the first page of that second email down, email from you, 31st January to Mohit Katecha, subject, Grenfell Tower External Envelope Inquiry. Morning, Mo, Gareth. Please see below costings ref the above. Rain screen overcladding, Rainabond zinc pattern of paint finish, which allows for under window areas, columns and crown. Then you give a figure of £629,000. Installation of rain screen, £183,500. Then you give a quote for windows and curtain wall, and then some exclusions. And if we just turn the page to see how this finishes, just for completeness, I'll provide a fully typed quotation letter Monday to firm up the above. Trust the above meets with your approval. Please ring me if you've any questions. Now, you're specifying there Rainabond zinc pattern of paint finish. If we just go back to the first page, focus on those words, you'll see Rainabond zinc pattern of paint finish. Was that for Rainabond ACM with a zinc pattern of paint finish?
I believe so, yes.
Right. Now, skip forward to the formal quote that you promised and indeed sent a few days later. This is at CEP 60148. I think we saw this earlier on,
Yes.
at the 2nd of February. And you can see there in the second paragraph, it's the paragraph I read to you earlier this morning, Rainabond zinc pattern of paint finished, ACM, aluminium composite material. So that's how the quotation ended up. Those quotes, as we can see and you say, are for a Rainabond ACM panel, aren't they?
Correct.
Yeah. Can you tell us why you didn't provide a quotation that you were asked for in the lead business specification for zinc CM?
No,
Or
I don't recall why this. It says it's a zinc patina. I don't recall the reason behind that.
Right.
If there was one, or there must have been one, but I don't recall why
Right.
that was the case.
You see, the specification I showed you
Yeah.
that Mohit had sent you didn't ask for an ACM product at all. So the question is, why were you quoting for one?
I don't recall.
And it didn't ask for a Rainabond or Arconic product at all, did it? So again, why were you quoting for one?
I don't recall why that's gone out like that, or what the reason behind it was.
Right. Now, if we go to your second witness statement, please, CEP 30642447 at page 13. I just want to look at paragraph 62 in the light of what we've just been looking at. Because in paragraph 62, you're asked the question under the heading, do you agree that you put Rainabond forward? Answer, no, I did not put Rainabond forward. I understand that Rainabond was one of the alternatives named in the specification. Now, the specification I think you're referring to there is the NBS specification done as part of the tender process later in 2013, and not the specification sent to you by Leadbitter in early 2013. But it's not correct, is it, to say that you didn't put Rainabond forward? We can see the quotation you sent originally to Leadbitter, and you did put Rainabond forward when you hadn't been asked for it. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, it would have been on that basis.
Yes. Now, in February 2013, when you put that quotation forward to Mohit Katecha at Leadbitter, you knew that you were quoting for a high-rise building, in other words, over 18 metres in height.
Correct.
And you were doing so in circumstances where you were proposing a different product from the one that Mr. Katecha had asked for, yes?
Correct.
Yes. Did you investigate at that time, so late January, early February 2013, when responding to the request for a quotation from Mr. Katecha, whether the Rainabond ACM panels that you were quoting for were suitable for a building over 18 metres?
I didn't know.
Why is that?
I don't recall.
Did you ask anybody at Arconic whether it was suitable for a building over 18 metres?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Did you check at all whether it was a suitable product to be used at that height?
I personally didn't. On the basis that Rainabond or Arconic had been at the meetings, I Yeah, I never considered that question.
You never considered that question. Right. I want to explore with you a little bit of what you understood Deborah French knew about Grenfell being a tall building. Can we go to CEP 3048975, please? This is an email of the 24th of January 2013 to Neil Wilson at CEP and also to Deborah French. And you're sending on to them the inquiry made by Mohit Kotecha of the 24th of January that we saw a few minutes ago in your evidence together. You see that?
Correct, yes.
Yes. Now, there's no message in your email in which you forward Mohit Kotecha's email to Debbie French or Neil Wilson. Why is that?
I was just forwarding on the information. I didn't believe there was any other message to add to it. I was just sending that information over to Neil Wilson and Debbie French.
Was Debbie French expecting the request for quotation, specification and drawings at the time?
I'm not sure whether she was expecting
Right.
that.
Did you have a conversation with Debbie French about this project and the possibility of a design, manufacture and supply at this time with Debbie French?
Not that I recall, but she'd been at the meeting when lead bitters were there in October.
What did you think she was expecting to do with the information when you sent it to her?
Review it in some depth.
Review it in some depth.
And pass any information on that we may need.
Right. To your knowledge, was Debbie French aware from this email and the attachments, if not before, that the building, Grenfell Tower, was over 18 metres in height?
I would expect so.
Yes. And is that because, and we can go to them if need be, that the attachments included the specification and drawings of the building, which make it clear that it is a building over 18 metres in height?
Correct.
Given that, and obviously we need to explore this with her to be fair to her, but given that on the face of it, she was being given information that would lead her to know that Grenfell Tower was a building in over 18 metres in height, would you expect her only to provide prices for materials or products which were suitable for buildings of those dimensions?
Yes.
Can we then move on to February 2013? We're at the beginning of it. If we go to your second witness statement, paragraph 10, please, page 10, paragraph 48. You say, I understand that Arconic and Deborah French were fully aware of the building size given that they had received the relevant documents. Is that a reference to the email of the 24th of January 2013 and the attachments that we've just seen?
I believe it would have been.
Right. Let's move on in time a little bit in February 2013. CEP 60150, please. This is an email from you to Deborah French of the 27th of February 2013. Grenfell Tower, London is the subject. Morning, Debbie. Ref the above project. I have a meeting with the architect, Studio E, on Monday, 4th of March regarding the rain screen overcladding. They've advised me that due to the cost of zinc rain screen, they are now considering alternative material and finishes to that of zinc. We'll propose your full Rainabond range and finishes as alternative options. Now, it's clear from that you were planning, at least at that stage, to go to a meeting with Studio E on the 4th of March, as we can see. Did you actually go?
I believe it did, yes, correct.
It looks as if Deborah French was not invited to that meeting. Is that right?
Correct.
And you say in the last sentence, we'll propose your full Rainabond range and finishes as alternative options. By we, do you mean CEP?
Yes.
So did you mean by this email that you were going to be promoting the full Rainabond range and finishes to Studio E, essentially on behalf of Deborah French?
Yes.
Had anybody asked you at that stage to put Renault Bond forward?
No.
So you were doing this voluntarily, effectively?
On behalf of CEP?
Well, for doing Debbie
Yes.
French, for Debbie French.
Yes.
Yes.
Go on. I'll let you continue.
Well, did you consider putting forward cladding from any other manufacturer or providing any alternative options to Studio E? For example, a Lucobond?
No.
Why is that?
We'd already introduced Renabond to the project. We dealt with both Lucobond and Renabond as the two principal ACM companies. We dealt with them both on an even basis, and it was courteous in our mind that we stayed with the one we'd introduced rather than bring another competitor in.
Well, why had you introduced Debbie French from
Because-
Arconic to start with?
Initially because I believe they had the zinc product that the Studio E was looking for.
Did a Lucobond not have that?
I'm not aware whether they did or they didn't.
Did you investigate?
No.
Why is that?
Initially, I was aware that Renabond had one and went with that decision.
Right. But if you'd been even-handed or equal between them, you would have
I
wanted...
believe we didn't have an account with a Lucobond at that time.
Right. So did that play into the decision as to whether to be...
Possibly.
Right. I see. Now, if we go to your second witness statement at page 6, please, I just want to show you something you say at paragraph 31. You say, under the heading Use of Renabond 55 on Grenfell Tower, I did not discuss or agree with Arconic, Harley, or any other party that I or CEP would recommend Renabond 55 cladding for use on Grenfell Tower. Now, in the light of the emails we've just been looking at, Mr. Blades, that's not correct, is it?
I didn't recommend a Renabond. I wouldn't say I recommended it, I introduced it.
Well, you were putting it forward.
Putting it forward, yeah. But I wouldn't say categorically that they recommend that you should use that.
Right. So would we would draw a distinction, would we, when reading that, between recommending and suggesting?
Yes.
What is the distinction? Can you help me?
If it was recommended, I think I would be endorsing it to use that solely and no other product that I was aware of. That's why I would recommend a recommendation.
Right, but by putting forward or promising that you would propose a full Renabond, as you told Debbie French you would, were you not recommending Renabond 55 cladding for use on Grenfell Tower?
No, I don't believe I was recommending that solely. I was showing Studio E or introducing Studio E to other finishers that may be suitable in light that the zinc option it wasn't meeting their cost parameters or their client's cost parameters.
Right, but you do agree that you agreed or discussed with Arconic that you would propose Renabond 55 cladding for use on Grenfell Tower. We've just seen that in the email.
Yes.
Right. And by proposing something, I have to suggest to you that that's the same as a recommendation.
Okay. That's not how I would recommend it.
All right. Let's look at March 2013. The story continues. You meet with Mr. Soanes and Mr. Jess of Studio E on the 4th of March. Do you remember that meeting?
So on the 4th of March?
Yes.
Yes.
And let's go to ART 60919, please. This is an email chain between Alan Dawson of Artelia. I'll just wait for it to come up. And Bruce Soanes, copied of David Hale on the 4th of March 2013. David Hale was at Appleyards. And the attachments are Grenfell Tower Regeneration Product, Bream Value Engineering. And if you go to the second email down on that page, the very bottom of the page, you can see there's an email there, which continues on to page 2. And I just want to show you the 4th bullet point on that page. Is there. We have had CEP come in today to discuss the cheaper ACM cladding option, and they will be forwarding samples for possible presentation to planning. From our conversation with CEP, we feel there might be scope to switch from zinc, but it will require a bit more elaboration than the Leadbitter's figure allows. We note that Leadbitter don't appear to have costed the zinc and have put in a budget figure only. Was it you who attended that meeting with Studio E on the 4th of March?
Yes.
You did. And at that meeting, did you have discussions with Mr. Soanes about using Renault Bond ACM?
Yes.
And did you do so as a cheaper option, cheaper than the zinc that they were after?
I wouldn't put it forward as a cheaper option. It was apparent from the conversation or the telephone call where Studio E requested me to go back down. They had suggested that zinc was too expensive for the client, it was too expensive on cost or whatever the reason was. So I went into it, to put forward other options that I considered were probably less expensive than zinc on that basis.
Right.
I don't know how much the zinc was. So we'd never quoted, never looked at zinc as a cost.
Was it your general experience that clients tended to choose ACM because of budgetary constraints?
No.
No? Can we go to Mr. Soanes' witness statement? Well, actually, before I ask you that, or show you that, can I just ask you, at this meeting, where it says, according to Mr. Soanes' note, that you'd come in today and discuss the cheaper cladding option, and they will be forwarding samples, can you tell me what do you recall was Mr. Soanes' reaction to the idea of changing zinc and using ACM instead?
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
Yes. What was Mr. Soanes' reaction to the idea of changing from zinc to ACM?
I don't think I don't recall, but I don't believe he had any objections to it.
Right. Okay. Can we go to his statement? SEA 30144273, please. And I want to go to page 88 and look at paragraph 207. Now, he says, 4 lines down from the start of that paragraph, in preparing this witness statement, I am reminded that Harley, in fact, later said that in its experience, clients tend to adopt the cheapest cladding option due to budget constraints. And I believe that Geof Blades, CEP, also indicated something similar to me at some point. Do you recall making a comment to Mr. Soanes that clients tend to adopt the cheapest cladding option because of budget constraints?
No.
You don't?
No.
You don't. At the time, and this is early March 2013, did you think that there were reasons to choose ACM other than budgetary constraints?
Yes.
What were those?
The ACM has a paint finish in whatever format, PDF or however it is, so the client and the design team can choose any particular colour they want, and they can match. In this instance, they could match the panels to the aluminium windows if they so chose, and that's one of the advantages of a paint finished product.
Was that discussed at the 4th of March meeting? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Flexibility in terms of choice of.
Possibly.
You say possibly.
I don't recall what was said at that meeting.
Right.
No, I don't recall what was said.
You don't recall what was said?
To that extent. I mean, it was a discussion about options other than zinc.
Right.
In that case.
I mean, we can see from the bullet point in the email I've just showed you that certainly budgets were discussed and optionality, if you forgive the word, about finishes was not. Is that a fair
I don't
summary?
recall discussing budgets.
Right.
With Studio E.
Right. Can we go to CEP 60151? This is an email from you to Deborah French on the 5th of March, the day after your 4th of March meeting with Mr. Soanes, and you are reporting to her the meeting that you'd had the previous day with Mr. Soanes, and indeed Adrian Jess at Studio E. And you start by saying, "Hi Debbie, positive meeting yesterday with Adrian Jess and Bruce Soanes of Studio E." What did you mean by that? By positive?
It probably went very well. It was positive. There was however you read positive to mean, it was a positive meeting.
Positive from whose point of view?
Well, certainly from my point of view, that they were happy with what I discussed.
Positive also from Debbie French's point of view? Yes?
You'd have to ask Debbie French whether that was the case, but I was happy with the meeting.
I mean, were you not telling her that it was a positive meeting because you had made some headway with Mr. Soanes in the possible selection of Rayner Bond products?
Yes, probably,
Yes.
yes.
And we can see from the email a bit lower down that you were asking her for the provision of information about seeker bonding of Rayner Bond as concealed fix is being considered for the lower area of rain screen. And then you ask for a series of samples: zinc patina, stainless look, copper patina, and gold look.
Correct.
All those samples, I think, is this right, were ACM, weren't they?
They would have been, yes.
With a PE core?
I believe they would have been.
Yes. And can we go to CEP 60152? This is Deborah French's response to you, in response to this email, of the 8th of March. You see that? And
Yep.
she attaches some pictures of a project she's done in Cambridge with zinc. And she starts by saying, "Hi Geoff, good to hear the meeting went well." So she was pleased about the meeting. Did you send the pictures that she was sending you on to Studio E? Do you remember?
The one that's at the bottom of the screen?
No, the attachments. If you want, we can look at one. But let's try. CEP 60154, please. This is one of the pictures that she was attaching to you of the project in Cambridge. Does that look familiar to you?
I don't recall it, but obviously it's an email to me, so I would have seen it at the time.
Right. Do you remember whether you sent this picture and others like it on to Studio E that you'd received from Debbie French?
I don't recall it, no.
Now, is it right that from this point on, say early March 2013, you didn't provide samples or pictures of projects to Studio E from any manufacturer other than Arconic?
Yes, and I'm not sure I provided those pictures either.
Right. Did Studio E ask only for Arconic samples, or did they leave that up to you?
They only asked me for Arconic samples.
Right. Can we then go to your unsolicited statement, CEP 508838, please? And I'd like to go to page 11, paragraph 7.42. You say there, the purpose of the meeting 4th of March 2013 was to discuss and consider alternative finishes as zinc was now being discounted due to cost issues. It was considered a matter of courtesy to continue with Arconic as it had already been introduced into this project. Surely, Mr. Blades, if another manufacturer had offered a better price, you would have pursued it.
Sorry, can you just repeat that question?
Yes, if another manufacturer of suitable panels, let me put it that way, was offering a better price in comparison with Rayner Bond, you would have pursued it.
I wouldn't have chosen another company just purely on price.
What else would you choose it on?
If in this instance, if another company had a more suitable product, more in line with what Studio E were considering, then I may have considered an alternative panel. But I wouldn't go out, I wouldn't look at somebody that's prices were cheaper or more competitive than Arconics just to change the product.
When you say it was considered a matter of courtesy to continue with Arconic, as it had already been introduced to this project, is what you really mean here not courtesy, but loyalty to your existing relationship with Arconic.
Loyalty to them and courtesy to them, because I wouldn't do the same if I'd introduced Alucobond to the project. I wouldn't then turn round and introduce another ACM company to the project.
Right.
We only had 2 suppliers of ACM,
I see.
and if we upset one, we're down to 1.
Right.
And we've lost
I see.
50% of our options.
I understand. So, would you accept then that looking at the emails of February and March that we have, you were actually trying to get Reynobond PE ACM panels onto Grenfell Tower?
Renobond panels, yes.
Right. Well, you say Reynobond panels, yes. I asked you Reynobond PE ACM panels.
Yes, but I wasn't. The core was never discussed at that point.
I see.
It wasn't a point of sale or a point of price.
Right.
To CEP at the time, the PE core was all inclusive with the Renobond panel.
I follow.
There was no distinction between one or the other.
All right, but Reynobond panels, yes, you say that.
Renobond panels, yes.
Can we look at your second witness statement, please, CEP 30642447 at page 6, and look at paragraph 32. You say, and again, it's under the same heading we looked at earlier. We looked at paragraph 31. I want to look at 32. Further, and in addition, neither I nor CEP recommended Reynobond 55 cladding for use on Grenfell Tower. I introduced Deborah French of Arconic to Studio E as being the representative of Arconic who could demonstrate their products. However, I had no involvement in the discussions. In the light of the emails we've been looking at, Mr. Blades, do you still say that you had no involvement in the discussions about the cladding on Grenfell Tower?
I wouldn't have been involved in the immediate discussions or the direct discussions with the Renobond Arconic panels. That was down to Arconic, Deborah French. They were her products to discuss in better knowledge than mine. So I was at the meetings. I would have discussed the CEP rain screen system and how a Renobond panel may or may not work with it. But in terms of the Renobond itself, it wasn't my field of knowledge to discuss it in any great depth as such.
But you were involved, I think, in the discussions between you, Debbie French, and Studio E about the choice of cladding on Grenfell Tower.
I was in discussion with them, yes.
Yes. And indeed, you had facilitated or helped to facilitate the choice of Reynobond panels on Grenfell Tower.
Within CEP, yes, the choice of the final panels was down to the architect and the client, etc. I'd introduced them to them with what I thought was a suitable panel product for that project at that time.
Yes. And so we need to read paragraph 32 in the light of what you now say.
Okay.
Yes. I'd like to turn to an email a little bit later in 2013, Mr. Blades. Can we go to CEP 3049719? This is an email of the 13th of May 2013 from Deborah French to Neil Wilson, you, and Roy Fuster at CEP.
Yep.
And I'd like to take a little bit of time on this email. So let's read it all. The subject is a BBC report being forwarded, and it refers to ACM in UAE, and there's a picture. And it says, "Hi. As you may be aware, there had been some reports via BBC concerning a fire on a building in UAE regarding ACM. As a business, we are aware of this report, and our technical team are following the details. But in the meantime, I wanted to add some thoughts that may help if you get questions from your customers, stroke clients, etc. Regarding the supply of Reynobond in the UK, as you know, we supply both PE and FR core and can control and understand what core is being used in all projects. due to the controlled supply route we have. By only supplying Renobond to a very small group of approved fabricators and working very closely with them on all projects, we are able to follow what type of project is being designed / developed and then offer the right Renobond specification, including the core. At this stage, we will continue to offer both PE and FR core and continue the close working relationship we have with our approved fabricators to make sure the right technical support, Renobond specification and materials are being used and installed on Renobond projects. Many thanks for making me aware of the reports and for your continued support. Do you remember receiving that email?
I do now, yes.
Now, it looks from the last sentence that it was CEP who had brought the UAE fire to Deborah French's attention. Is that right?
I don't recall that.
Right. Now, it's possible, to be fair to you, that this email was a round-robin email to other fabricators. She was telling all of her fabricators the same thing. But from your recollection, do you remember whether it was CEP or somebody else who had become aware of the fire in the UAE and had brought it to her attention?
I would believe it was somebody else. It certainly wasn't myself, and I don't recall anybody else at CEP. I didn't certainly send anything to Deborah French.
Right. Do you recall the fire in the UAE which she's talking about?
Only now I'm aware of these documents now. I wasn't aware of it at the time other than through these documents.
Right. So do we take it from that you didn't see or hear the reports through the BBC of a fire in a building in the UAE?
No. I may have seen
involving
it.
ACM.
I may have seen it after I'd seen this. I don't recall.
Was this email therefore the first that you learnt about that fire?
I believe it wasn't.
You believe it wasn't?
I think we got one off of Lucabond a couple of days before.
What, a similar message?
Same sort of email, yes.
Right.
Or a similar type of email. They'd seen it on the BBC a couple of days before, and we got one from the Lucabond.
I see. And who was your contact from the Lucabond who you got that email from?
At that time, it was Richard Geeter.
Richard Geeter. Did you understand from this email, and let's work with this one, that the fire was thought to have involved ACM with a PE core?
I believed it was an ACM. What the core was, I wasn't aware of.
Right. Did you know about any other cladding fires involving ACM or ACM with a PE core particularly?
Other than the one we've mentioned at Grenfell. At Camden.
Right. Did you understand from this that ACM with a PE core was combustible?
If the one that was used in this project was a PE core, then yes, I would have been.
Right. Following this email, Mr. Blades, did you consider that ACM with a PE core might be a dangerous product for use on a high-rise building because of its combustible properties?
Not if it had been installed with the correct fire barriers and fire strategies that are required with the cladding system.
Was that your thought at the time?
Possibly, yes. I don't recall what my thought at the time was.
What did you do in response to this email?
With regards to...
Well, what did you do internally at CEP in response to this
We
email?
may have had a quick conversation about it. I don't recall.
Did you start looking more carefully at whether FR cored ACM should be specified on particular projects, particularly high-rise projects, in place of PE?
I don't recall if we did or not. No.
Is there any reason why you didn't start to look more carefully at whether PE was safe to use on high-rise buildings?
I'm not aware of a reason why we didn't or did look at it any further.
You say we may have had a quick conversation about it.
An email came into 3 people, so there could have been a few comments about it.
Was this not a major alarm bell for CEP as a manufacturer or rather as a fabricator of ACM panels?
It could have been, yes.
Well, you say it could have been. I can suggest to you it certainly should have been, but the question I have is, was it?
It wasn't me personally, no.
Well, you're personally a recipient of this email. What I'm really keen to get to the bottom of is why you didn't react more strongly to this message and start thinking hard about whether the use of ACM PE core panels were safe on buildings above 18 metres in the UK.
We would have relied on designers possibly to ensure that that product or the products that was being chosen were compliant.
Did this email cause you to look again perhaps at the BBA certificate for Rainier Bond ACM panels?
I'm not aware it did. No.
Or to question it?
No.
Did you think to question it?
I don't recall doing that, no.
Did any other clients or the market or other fabricators in the same position as you express any views to you about the fire risks inherent in using PE as opposed to FR core?
Not that I'm aware of.
Was there any market discussion beyond this email that you were aware of at the time?
No,
or were
I
involved
wasn't
in?
aware of any market discussions about it.
Mr. Chairman, we're approaching 1 o'clock and mid-line, and I'm going to turn to a very slightly different aspect of the same document. It may be an appropriate moment to break.
Well, if it's not inconvenient to you, I suggested it probably is a good idea, because these things have a habit of going longer than you initially expect.
Yes, this line is probably another 10 minutes, so I will eat into
Well,
the
then
break.
let's have a break now. Yes, all right. Mr. Blades, we're going to have a break now so we can all get some lunch.
Okay.
We'll resume at 2 o'clock, please. And remember not to talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it while you're out of the room.
Thank you.
All right? Thank you very much. Would you go with the usher, please? All right, 2 o'clock then, please.